The man's name was Sichuan Park, and he unintentionally entered the Black Tower on his way home after buying groceries. No one may enter these Black Towers without an invitation. Their origins are unknown, but they have appeared all throughout the world. Moreover, there is the reward that adventurers receive when clearing it. The cost of these golden tickets has skyrocketed to 200 million won per. Naturally, he couldn't afford one as a recent hire. Therefore, when Sichuan Park noticed the portal, he hurried in, believing it to be his good fortune, not understanding that this doorway was actually a Black Tower bug. The administrator of the Black Tower also spotted Sichuan Park's presence, so they had to swiftly resolve the issue. Park Sejun, in the meantime, was still pleased, but he abruptly stopped when he realized he was nowhere near the plaza the adventurer had described. However, it was a lonely hole with just a 3- or 4-story escape, and no matter how loud he yelled, he played about all day without getting anywhere, and when his hunger began to growl, there was no reply. Luckily, he had also brought in some food that he had recently purchased from the grocery. Considering the little amount of food, he placed them neatly and carefully. Sichuan Park realized that he had no idea how long he would be stuck once he had filled his stomach. And his food supply wouldn't last for several days. He needed to find a way out before his food ran out, else he would undoubtedly starve. He saw the apple seeds from his previous meal at that precise time, and Sichuan Park got a brilliant idea. Self-sufficiency. After doing all of this, he sliced the few spring onions he had into pieces and buried the apple. Night had already fallen when a horrifying sound suddenly appeared. As he looked up, he was startled by the sound. Sichuan Park was so terrified after seeing a flying dragon that he passed out. It took him 2 days to wake up. He then inadvertently leaned on a plant, and when he realized what had happened, he was perplexed as to how a tree could have been here. Remarkably, the apple and cherry tomato seeds adjacent had sprouted, and the spring onions he had planted 2 days previously had grown to a height of nearly 2 meters. Ordinary plants couldn't grow this quickly. It appears that the Black Tower's power affected them so as not to interfere with the unsprout's growth. Sichuan Park chose to gather the spring onions first. He tasted them right away since he was intrigued about how they tasted. The spring onions had become even spicier, and at that instant he knew what it was to be fully revitalized. It came out that the spiciness had been significantly increased in addition to the growth rate changing. Sichuan Park was interested in the floor the cave was on once he recovered, wondering if it was at a height that was inaccessible even for the best players. He looked up abruptly and saw a few drips of water fall on his face, which he found quite unusual. There was a rabbit at the top of the cave. Using Sichuan Park as a stepping stone, the rabbit sprang down and amazed him with a series of acrobatic moves. The rabbit appeared to be unusual in that it also shown interest in the spring onions that had been planted. It then gestured to Sichuan Park by pointing at them and smacking its lips. Sichuan Park saw that the rabbit was begging to eat some, so he obeyed. Surprisingly, the rabbit shared Sichuan Park's fondness for spring onions, and the two of them settled down to share some munching. Following its consumption, the rabbit began to chatter and call out to the forest above the cave, which piqued Sichuan Park's curiosity. After that, a second rabbit leaped down from above to join the first, and Sichuan Park recognized they were a pair based on their close-knit behavior. And the bunnies attested to it. The two bunnies appeared to have arrived with a goal in mind. They want to dwell there beside Sichuan Park. It was very difficult to say no when you saw the small bunnies' frail and pathetic faces light up with excited expectation. Sichuan Park granted their request as well, but they couldn't just take advantage of him before he could fully outline his demands. The rabbits jumped on him to show their appreciation, and then they got to work. One of them was in charge of watering the plants, and the other person handled clipping the spring onions. Sichuan Park wasn't prepared for the rabbits to arrive with their own implements for farming. Mrs. Rabbit's apron appeared to have spatial magic, while Mr. Rabbit's watering can generate water continually. Ability to make farming implements like shovels and shears with their assistance, the farm task was finished swiftly. The cherry tomatoes at Sichuan Park were also growing far more quickly than they had previously. It appears the rabbits were assisting in the plant growth. The pair of bunnies was observing Sichuan Park with trepidation, believing that he was not happy with their labor, because he had earlier said that they could not just survive off of nothing. But Sichuan Park recognized their efforts, which delighted the couple of rabbits. The rabbits then began to converse and fled to a neighboring vacant corner. Following his selection of a location with good geomancy, Mr. Rabbit and Mrs. Rabbit started excavating the area. After hanging a garland, Rabbit created a comfortable home. Mr. Rabbit was pretty exhausted from the building. Nonetheless, Sichuan Park recognized their skills. Nonetheless, Mrs. Rabbit began phoning shortly after with explicit intentions. Shortly calling Mr. Rabbit to enter the home so they could have a conversation. Mr. Rabbit was shocked because it was daytime. After all, but Mrs. Rabbit took him inside the home as she left Sichuan Park, crying, blessing them. She didn't care about the passing of time. Who knows what it's like to be alone? Just then, a plume of black smoke appeared out of nowhere behind him. Sichuan Park was so badly burned that he sprung up in agony and tumbled furiously on the ground as he turned around. He found out that it was actually originating from a plastic bottle. The sunlight was concentrated into a point by the plastic bottle's response. Exactly falling on him, Sichuan Park was surprised when he realized what had happened. Despite the difficult circumstances, he hasn't given up hope. Yes, this is the first instruction on how to make a fire outside in the woods. However, after several efforts, it appeared that Sichuan Park would not succeed. It was not as simple as he had thought. At that very time, the door of the rabbit pair was forced open. Then Mr. Rabbit emerged looking pale. Then he spotted Sichuan Park laying there on the ground, blowing on leaves. He went over to provide assistance right away. You arrived at the perfect moment. Then, the rabbit started blowing air at the leaves, and Sichuan Park got up to direct the sunlight again. Sichuan Park was overjoyed to see that a flame had been ignited the following seconds, since it meant he could now enjoy prepared meals. The spring onions were eventually ready after roasting for a while. Once the charred outer layer was removed, the spring onion's flavor changed to one of sweetness and crispness. The spring onions tasted like candy after being roasted over charcoal, resembling a wild horse galloping over the plains. After that, the couple of rabbits mimicked him and picked up the skill of eating roasted spring onions. It only took them a few bites to realize that human food tastes better than theirs. Sichuan Park also had his first prepared meal since arriving at the Black Tower the next morning. When he awoke, Sichuan Park had finished eating and drinking and had created torches out of the flame with the intention of using them to illuminate the whole cave. However, he came upon a big fish that sprang out of the water as he was traveling and saw it battling on the bottom. Perhaps because of the darkness, Sichuan Park was astonished to see fish here for the first time and was eager to begin cooking the enormous fish. He took a large bite out of the grilled fish, and Sichuan Park kept praising it for the long-missed taste of flesh. But to his astonishment, the pair of rabbits also desired to taste it. Despite his amazement, he allowed the rabbits to sample it. In the days that followed, he discovered certain patterns. This location would see a solar eclipse every 30 days, whereby a blue moon would rise in the sky and some unidentified creatures would prowl the cave entrance. Sichuan Park was using conventional timekeeping techniques because his computer and phone were running on low batteries, and this was day 61 of his captivity in the cave. The rabbit couple also produced a large number of young bunnies. These young rabbits had a special interest in Sichuan Park, who ended up becoming their godfather. Sichuan Park offered to assist the couple of rabbits in caring for the naughty little ones because they were becoming too much for them to handle. He showed the young bunnies his vegetable garden after obtaining their consent, and the cherry tomatoes he had planted were now happily blossoming. Luckily, he visited Sichuan Park daily to personally pollinate them, but eventually Sichuan Park also felt a little overrun. A little rabbit attempted to fly here at the same moment, playing with the cherry tomato blossoms as he was at Sichuan Park. If only bees could fly here. However, once the naughty bunny calmed down, a tiny piece of pollen that had fallen prompted it to sneeze. When Siwon Park noticed that fruits had started to sprout on the tomato plant, he became extremely joyful and started to sing and dance. The next morning, Sichuan Park put on a spring onion cold weather ensemble as the first sign that his 2 months of hard work had finally paid off. Then, ready for a fresh solar eclipse, he bid the rabbit couple farewell as they entered their house. As dusk approached, a multitude of creatures ambled outside the cave, leaving Sichuan Park sitting inside staring blankly. He can't sleep because of the outside commotion, which keeps the monsters from finding him. Sichuan Park pretended not to smell, but it was painful to wait for the blue moon to stop, just when he thought he could stand it a little while longer. Sichuan Park was looking up towards the cave entrance when he heard a loud commotion coming from outside. A large red bear was also fixedly staring at the opening. Sichuan Park's pulse rate shot up at seeing the enormous beast in front of him. Luckily, the red bear was still unaware of the small human within the cave. When Sichuan Park realized this, he attempted to conceal more into the cave, but sadly, water bottles and cans from his backpack dropped to the floor. The red bear had already taken up position at the entrance to the cave, despite his belief that the sound was too faint to draw it in. Sichuan Park was completely horrified by this image, and the red bear was screaming outside as if it were about to devour him. He quickly passed out from sheer terror, and as daybreak arrived, the little bunnies appeared to awaken Sichuan Park. Seeing him soundly asleep, Mr. Rabbit smacked him to wake him up. Observing this, Mr. Rabbit informed him that the blue moon had already passed. Thinking back on what happened the previous evening, Sichuan Park was on the verge of passing away because his spring onion coat had fallen off. After the rabbit pair started the fire, Mrs. Rabbit discovered a covering for Sichuan Park, where she was presently shivering from the cold. Sichuan Park became much warmer, and after Mrs. Rabbit gave him some grilled fish to eat, Sichuan Park began to wonder how he was still alive. Sichuan Park realized that overthinking was pointless and that his only options were to eat healthily and survive at that moment. When Mr. Rabbit saw the chatting at Sichuan Park, he quickly raced over and became quite intrigued, and went to the vegetable garden after Mr. Rabbit. By this time, the cherry tomatoes had ripened and grown, emitting a crystalline radiance. Sichuan Park was astounded by what he saw, finding it impossible to believe that in just one day. Even though the cherry tomatoes were gorgeous and fresh, he was startled by how much they had grown. The cherry tomatoes were truly blue. Sichuan Park saw a system message as he was debating whether or not they were ready. The display on the system indicated that Sichuan Park's presence was the result of an error made by the Black Tower administrator, therefore signifying his accomplishment of harvesting fruits charged with the energy of the blue moon. Sichuan Park saw this right away and yelled at the system, asking that the administrator send him out. However, the administrator was undecided on whether to kill him in order to hide the error. Sichuan Park objected strongly to this. Perhaps feeling bad, the supervisor of the Black Tower allowed Sichuan Park to awaken. It indicated that he was about to formally awaken inside the Black Tower, and Sichuan Park was excited to see what class he would be taking. Sichuan Park was shocked when the administrator of the Black Tower made the choice, albeit he had been hoping for his favorite, a wizard. Even if the work characteristics in front of him were beneficial, he couldn't believe that he had woken up as an F-class farmer. He was going to bash the cherry tomatoes on the ground out of frustration when he noticed the little bunnies underneath. Observing the terrified expression on the rabbit family's face, Sichuan Park stopped himself, realizing that this was the result of their combined effort. After calming down, Sichuan Park took another look at the blue cherry tomatoes. He then held the cherries in his hand. Recognizing that the tomatoes were the product of their labor and that he shouldn't throw his fury at them suggested that maybe farming wasn't all that horrible after all. At that point, a circle of light appeared from the cherry tomato in Sichuan Park's palm, and he invited the bunnies to go farming together. Sichuan Park recognized from the description that this cherry tomato was unlike any other since it was not just delicious. It also had the amazing ability to continuously boost magic energy. Sichuan Park now understood that the cherry tomato was a genuine object. Additionally, even though it could only raise magic by 2 steps, the energy wasn't always the same by 0.05, which was still unexpected. The administrator of the Black Tower was focusing hard on the fresh cherry tomatoes in the food garden at Sichuan Park. Sichuan Park was praising the little bunnies for their assistance in the garden, its stomach rumbling uncontrollably. If not for their assistance, the garden would not have grown to this extent, but when the system notice appeared once more, their happiness was short-lived. Giving Sichuan Park a new task, the risk of refusing was death, but the mission's prize was a job skill. Sichuan Park shook all over, even though it was referred to as a mission for a brief period. Sichuan Park gave the cherry tomato to the administrator of the Black Tower, but to him it seemed more like a threat. He was concerned about the consequences of declining. Since it was stated that the mission reward was a job skill, the cherry tomato vanished in the following second, and his goal was effectively accomplished. Sichuan Park was curious as to what it was, and he learned a level 1 sewing talent which let him down. Yet because he was a farmer by trade, stitching seemed like a fitting talent. Thankfully, he had realized what he was doing. There were plenty of piranhas in the pond, but he didn't intend to capture them all at once to level up. He could now also earn experience points by fishing. Instead, he made the decision to capture as much food as he required. Sichuan Park loudly summoned the rabbits over after frying all the piranhas. After giving the baby rabbit his portion, the 2 largest fish were delivered to the rabbit couple. All of the rabbits came racing. The rabbit couple's true identity was revealed to him now that he was aware of their occupation. They were once known as white farmer bunnies. Sichuan Park surmised that they must have lost their farm since they were more adept at farming than fighting, and that's why they went here. Sichuan Park got up excitedly after eating, wishing he could grasp bunny language at least so he could talk to them. The rabbit pair also cheerfully replied to Sichuan Park at this very moment, as it is a significant day for their farm. Their vegetable garden was doing well. The little cherry tomatoes had grown into enormous fully fledged cherries. When Sichuan Park looked at the typically colored cherry tomatoes, his eyes were full with expectation. It was finally time to harvest, and the small bunnies felt precisely the same way he did after working so hard for so long. Sichuan Park's hands trembled as he stretched out and selected the first cherry tomato under the rabbit's hungry stare. Additionally, Sichuan Park earned 10 experience points for selecting the proper magic cherry tomatoes. Compared to the blue cherry tomatoes, they had a less lasting impact in terms of enhancing magic energy. The magic energy was momentarily increased by 0.1% for 10 minutes, compounding up to 10 times. Sichuan Park saw this and wondered if the other cherry tomatoes were the same. Selecting unripe cherry tomatoes earned him fewer experience points because he consistently had all the ripe cherry magic tomatoes. As a result, Sichuan Park realized that only little ripe tomatoes were considered items, while unripe ones were merely food. Sichuan Park's level rose to 4 when he gathered many ripe cherry tomatoes. Sichuan Park was excited to sample the cherry tomatoes after his hectic workday, but the rabbit family next to him voiced their displeasure. Upon observing this, Sichuan Park quickly apologized to the small bunnies, saying that they had worked hard on it and he shouldn't have enjoyed it by himself. After splitting the cherry tomatoes that Sichuan Park had provided, Mr. Rabbit eventually became calm. The rabbits in Sichuan Park started to savor this treat, and they were delighted by the cherry tomato's delicious softness. And Sichuan Park took a cherry tomato and gave it a cautious chew. The combination of the fruits and vegetables flavors made him feel as though he was seeing summer fireworks. Observing Sichuan Park rip apart the rabbit, a couple shook their heads, perplexed by his response following the consumption of the cherry tomatoes. The little bunnies resumed their work, using spring onions to make a tomato storage area. The fact that the young bunnies could now assist the adults gave Sichuan Park comfort because he had put in a lot of effort today as well. So he put on a makeshift eye mask and got ready for bed. However, the administrator of the Black Tower assigned another task before he could get any rest. This time, Sijuan Park had to turn in 100 magic cherry tomatoes as part of the task. But he didn't want to cope with it and turned over to sleep. When the administrator of the Black Tower noticed this, he hastily dispatched reminders, compelling Sijuan Park to awaken after gathering the cherry tomatoes. Reluctantly, Sijuan Park revealed the task reward when the Black Tower's administrator departed, according to Sijuan Park. What he received was a harvesting skill. Sijuan Park initially believed it to be a standard skill, but as he carried on working the following day, he discovered that collecting the unripe or overripe cherry tomatoes was almost a heavenly ability for a farmer like him. Sijuan Park didn't have to wait for the cherry tomatoes to ripen because when he plucked them, they would instantly transform into magical cherry tomatoes. And as he and the Black Tower's young charges were working on the other Meansville Andean, what the Harvest Soldier did never know, how did the Harvest Soldier Dasher Bob citizens, as well as the entire generation of Chinese politicians of the Hausen brothers who were led in the Palestinian Kabeza, the little rabbits were getting ready to sleep. When the administrator of the Black Tower sent out another mission to turn in 200 magic cherry tomatoes, and while Sijuan Park had expected the administrator to return, there was no incentive this time. He assumed that the administrator had granted him a valuable talent, so he didn't anticipate that there wouldn't be a prize this time. Once more, Sijuan Park gave Mr. Rabbit the cherry tomatoes, but he was not happy with it. Following that, the administrator needed more magic cherry tomatoes each time, exhibiting no symptoms of moderation, and the assignments increased in frequency until 500 magic cherry tomatoes were assigned. Sijuan Park was taken aback since he had not anticipated the opposing side to be so avaricious this time. After Sijuan Park angrily refused to give up the miraculous cherry tomatoes, the administrator of Black Tower was a little taken aback. Since Sijuan Park had never before defied the administrator's orders, the avaricious Black Tower administrator not only stole their labors but also offered no compensation, which infuriated Sijuan Park. After all, we must also support our way of life. A litter of young bunnies doesn't eat modest amounts of food, isn't that excessive? However, the administrator of the Black Tower said that Sijuan Park was the cause of the problem, not his, and upon hearing this, Sijuan Park became even more enraged, demanding that he give over the miraculous cherry tomatoes right away. These are the results of my laborious efforts over a number of days. The administrator believed he was exaggerating. With all of his remaining patience gone, Sijuan Park declined this time and turned away. Disregarding the communications from the other side after realizing this, the administrator became anxious in the days that followed. Despite threats to his life, Sijuan Park deliberately ignored the administrator's warnings and went about his own business. He didn't give a damn. He didn't want to share the harvest with someone who harvested without planting, but believed that Sijuan Park had an obligation to follow the administrator's instructions without question. "This is precisely why I don't want to contribute," Sijuan Park moaned gently. "You pulled me here against my will and don't appreciate the effort I've put into my job." Sijuan Park stated, "I give almost no rewards despite being the tower's administrator. You are just a heartless employer, and you can't do anything about it." The administrator was shocked to hear Sijuan Park's remarks since no one had ever dared to address him in such a way before. His question, "Did I do something wrong?" left him slightly perplexed. The proud dragon could only gently apologize after that. However, Sijuan Park was caught smuggling some cherry tomatoes through the crystal ball before he could finish. When he realized this, he grew enraged and yelled at Sijuan Park to do the work right now or he would eliminate him. Sijuan Park stole a peek. The young bunnies were fighting over the food, "So I'll give you 5 this time and the rest later." The administrator triumphantly said that it would let it go this time when the cherry tomatoes were taken away in the following second. But to joyfully depart, not expecting such indulgence in the future. Sijuan Park surmised that the administrator of the Black Tower would be a very gullible person as a result of this. As with the previous 2 occasions, this was the 91st day and the night of the 4th blue moon. Sichuan Park was ready. He constructed a set of earmuffs and a cloak. He also consumed the cherry tomatoes, boosting his magic power, which he thought would shield him from the monster's roars, but he still prayed that the previous situation wouldn't recur. Sichuan Park was enthralled when the sun was veiled by the moon, casting a blue glow on the cherry tomatoes, as he had never witnessed plants absorb moonlight before. He also saw the cherry tomatoes changing at the same time. The cherry tomatoes changed into blue cherry tomatoes at the same moment, creating a whooshing sound. Could it be that sweet potatoes can absorb moonlight since the surrounding sweet potatoes also displayed extraordinary activity? Curiosity driving, Sichuan Park hurried over and kicked aside the dirt that was covering them. The previous sweet potatoes had developed into a powerful sweet potato with blue moon energy, shocking Sichuan Park. Its qualities were distinct from those of cherry tomatoes. It enhanced strength and ability, which was followed by several level-up cues. With a large sweet potato in his right hand and a cherry tomato in his left, he selected the blue cherry tomatoes. Just then, a task panel surfaced once more, and Sichuan Park anticipated this to happen since he felt like he dominated the globe. However, two missions appeared out of nowhere, one calling for a blue cherry tomato and the other for a blue powerful sweet potato. This time, the death penalty looked a little severe. If I refuse, it looks like I could actually get dealt with. However, Sichuan Park arrived ready with the plan, which called for doing the prior assignment first and gathering the several hundred cherry tomatoes he hadn't supplied the previous time. The administrator first expressed happiness but then gave Sichuan Park a perplexed glance. He noticed that the cherry tomatoes were confused, making him wonder whether he was covertly hatching other schemes. The administrator forewarned Sichuan Park that he would not be giving the blue cherry tomatoes and blue powerful sweet potatoes this time, and that he would have to give them the following time. Then went satisfied, thinking about what to do next as he stared at the blue mighty sweet potato and cherry tomato he was holding. Sichuan Park, wearing a joyful expression, chewed the blue cherry tomato, clearly having to put it in his mouth. And then all of a sudden, he was trembling with excitement throughout his body. This flavor was rich, sweet, and refreshing. It tasted like a festival, so he decided to roast the powerful sweet potato as well since he couldn't stand it. Even though it was unfortunate that he didn't have aluminum foil, he was lucky to have adaptable onion leaves by morning. The couple of rabbits decided to investigate when the solar eclipse finished because they could smell a delectable scent. Then turned to face-smacking behind Sichuan Park. Their arrival was well-timed as the scent of the roasted sweet potatoes, charged with blue moon energy, was inviting. Just as Sichuan Park was going to offer the administrator the sweet potatoes, he saw that the young bunnies were drooling. He then looked at the blue cherry. Abruptly, Mr. Rabbit moved in front of him, stroking the young rabbits to cease their attempts to clarify something to the family of rabbits. Sichuan Park was aware of Mr. Rabbit's goals. Mr. Rabbit believed there was just one powerful sweet potato. Consequently, he wanted Sichuan Park to enjoy it alone. Sichuan Park was brought to tears upon seeing this, but he did not tell Mr. After spotting the rabbit devouring a large sweet potato covertly earlier, Sichuan Park couldn't wait to taste it. Nonetheless, as he hurled the powerful sweet potato to the ground, he scorched his mouth and began to cry out in agony. Just as Mr. Rabbit was going to reach out for the massive sweet potato on the ground, he began to fear. The young rabbits were quicker than Mr. Rabbit, and before he could respond, they had already placed it in their mouths. Regretfully, the sweet potatoes inside was still heated. The young bunnies promptly spewed out the massive sweet potato. Fortunately, the bunnies were unharmed. The only disappointment was the wonderful roasted sweet potato that was left on the ground. Nevertheless, they burnt their lips and began to howl in agony. Sichuan Park became aware that the resources available were being squandered upon seeing the roasted sweet potato on the ground. Mr. Rabbit was dissatisfied with the quantity of sweet potato on the ground. Hence, he made the decision to increase the growing of sweet potatoes. The little bunnies were specifically consuming the sweet potato stems. When the young bunnies heard that Dad had temporarily banned eating sweet potato stems, they became agitated. They started to wail and whine, but Sijuan Park was unfazed because they kept eating throughout the day. And it wouldn't take these small ones long to finish everything. With response, Sijuan Park made the following offer. If you assist me with planting sweet potato stems, I'll reward you. We will enjoy more delicious roasted sweet potato stems. Sijuan Park made an offer, in exchange for your assistance planting sweet potato stems. We will have more delicious roasted sweet potatoes for supper, and I will provide you with some unique treats. The young bunnies began planting the sweet potatoes in a systematic way while drooling all over. The 2 and 3rd were in charge of planting, while the strong and eldest was in charge of digging holes. The youngest, the 5th, found it quite easy. All she had to do was arrange the sweet potato sprouts, while the 4th placed first. The 5th rabbit suddenly had a rumbling tummy as he peered at the delicate sweet potato leaves, hoping that perhaps no one would witness him sneaking a nibble. Then, as if to say, "You little rascal working yet sneaking food," Mr. Rabbit smacked him down. Conversely, Sijuan Park was gathering cherry tomatoes in order to prepare some unique appetizers. At that moment, Sijuan Park's information panel continued to appear, and his level was raised from Farmer F to E. He then hung the cherry tomatoes on fish bones to facilitate their eventual roasting. The administrator of the Black Tower was observing Sijuan Park's deeds with pride, but as Sijuan Park turned around, it must have been spying since Sijuan Park saw it even though it was hiding. A little while later, the grilled cherry tomatoes were ready. The small bunnies instantly stopped working on their farms and hopped in the direction of Sijuan Park upon hearing Sijuan Park's call. The just-prepared grilled cherry tomato bone skewers with the tomatoes strung on pristine piranha bones made the fruit much softer and sweeter. The young bunnies were salivating over the cherry tomato skewers that had been cooked. After that, Sijuan Park cautioned them not to rush since the food was still quite hot from the fire and nearly all of the sweet potato sprouts had been planted. When it came time for him to make dinner for tonight, Sijuan Park found it nearly hard to consume them. He then produced a powerfully developed sweet potato. I was somewhat abacked to see that it had yielded 5 potatoes. According to the description, eating them would dissolve 10 grams of fat and boost one's strength capacity by 0.1 for 10 minutes. Sijuan Park saw several unhealthy-looking sweet potato leaves nearby after collecting a total of 15 massive sweet potatoes. He continued to plant it since he didn't want to waste any. And at that moment, the information screen reappeared because Sijuan Park had mastered the planting technique. He hadn't anticipated that planting via himself would improve survival rates for the sowing skill. Apparently, in order to increase familiarity, I have to conduct all the planting myself. He swiftly motioned for the little bunnies to halt. He completed the remaining planting on his own as the administrator tinkered with something in the space. Cherry tomatoes are delicately skewered, and then you attempt to roast them over the fire like Sijuan Park a few moments later. It turned out that it had failed to remove the burned peel, so as I bit into them, I spat them all out since they were so bitter. The administrator was also rather interested in what Sijuan Park was doing at the same moment, so when she saw Sijuan Park contentedly consuming roasted, massive sweet potatoes, she was taken aback. When I saw this, I was really angry. How could you people eat roasted sweet potatoes in front of Aileen Pratani, the giant black dragon? Then Sijuan Park was given the duty, please give 1 roasted sweet potato to the administrator of the Black Tower. Sijuan Park was startled to learn that refusal meant death and turned to reject after observing the administrator's tense response. There's just 1 remaining, Sijuan Park remarked nonchalantly. Don't you think the administration need to give a reward? Quickly changing the assignment this time, with little regard for niceties, it added an occupational talent as a reward. Sijuan Park was thrilled to hear this and said, I'll give you 1. Sijuan Park then excitedly unwrapped the prize. Congratulations! You now possess the ability to shop at the seed shop. To utilize it, you can buy products there once every 30 days. Sijuan Park got up with excitement since he could now buy more goods because he had a business. He used the talent right away. However, Sijuan Park realized at that very instant that he was broke. In the meanwhile, the information box prompted, "You receive 1 dungeon coin as this is your first time using the store." Sijuan Park money was placed with a ding. Dungeon coins were used for the shop transactions. 1 dungeon coin was worth around 10,000 won. He could only see 3 things and could only buy 1 of them because of the new user rights. Upon examining the available seeds, Sichuan Park became aware that several of them were not particularly beneficial. The small bunnies all gazed at Sichuan Park and made sounds next to him, until just carrots remained. Carrots. The couple of rabbits drooled, twitching their ears uncontrollably and making flapping noises as a result. Mr. Rabbit could take no more of the carrot's incessant repetition, which Sichuan Park also thought to be quite entertaining, and gave them a flying kick right away. Sichuan Park then bought carrot seeds, which the bunnies eagerly anticipated eating. And even the administrator was rather pleased. After that, they would simultaneously sow the freshly bought seeds. The rabbit pair expected that Sichuan Park would be able to acquire the carrot seeds as a little bee was stealthily making its way toward Sichuan Park. Every day they looked forward to seeing them, even remaining in the vegetable garden after meals. Since that is the case, let them to observe. Because he had to manually pollinate the cherry tomatoes in the afternoon, Sichuan Park made the decision to relax first. Sichuan Park was trying to shoo away a buzzing sound that he heard near to his ear as he was about to lay asleep. Even the small bunnies were unable to sleep as flies kept buzzing about him. This irritated him much. Where are these insects flying around from? Subsequently, a tiny bee materialized before him. It gazed at him with curiosity, having never laid eyes on a person before. Sichuan Park was utterly mesmerized by the tiny insect, that he was unable to talk. Is this a tiny bee sent from heaven to answer my prayers? It's so adorable. Sichuan Park believed he had acquired a new employee. Sichuan Park shook as her information panel appeared, warning her that she had come into contact with a deadly honeybee that was extremely harmful. He then turned around to ask the rabbit couple if it was indeed harmful, but by the time he turned around, they had already fled with their kids. So she's dangerous, isn't she? How could you leave me alone and flee? Sichuan Park shouted. The following piece of information was even scarier. The carnivorous deadly honeybee hunts its prey with its stinger and then consumes their flesh. It's imperative that you stay away from the deadly honeybee stinger, which Sichuan Park swiftly indicated to her not to approach. It was this behavior that infuriated her at this crucial juncture. I don't taste good, I'm just skin and bones. Sichuan Park picked up a nearby tomato blossom and said, Don't eat me, eat this instead. The tiny honeybee was startled to see the fresh bloom and became calm. The little honeybee approached and smelled the blossom, indicating that she was much intrigued by its Sichuan Park. She seemed to truly adore Sichuan Park's flower, even burying half of her head in it, while he discreetly observed her timid glances. It was difficult to believe that the happy bee was actually a carnivore until Sichuan Park saw that he still needed to manually pollinate the little tomatoes. He found the confidence to speak with the tiny bee. If you're hungry, sample the fresh flowers behind. The little honeybee soon submerged itself in the flower bed, much to Sichuan Park's delight. I must add that I am a genius since I don't have to go out of my way to pollinate the little tomatoes personally. The little bunnies were hiding behind a rock. When Sichuan Park noticed them, they were giddy with excitement, asking, Do you have the face to come back? You left me alone to run away. They were very thrilled to see the tiny honeybee in the rock. When the small bunnies heard this, they gave their cutest performance, and the little honeybee took off toward Sichuan Park. Frightening him to the point that he fell to the rock, the tiny honeybee landed on top of him and spread out idly. Unexpectedly, she dozed off. However, her stinger didn't actually sting me, thus Sichuan Park's farm welcomed a new family member. The 120th day passed very swiftly, and the small honeybee's assistance enhanced the cherry tomatoes production as well. The little honeybee was incredibly conscientious. arriving at the farm early in the morning to work and leaving at night to return to the forests outside the cave. Sichuan Park's meal received an upgrade when the tiny honeybee added honey, suggesting that she was returning to her own colony. Improving the flavor of the spring onions considerably, the setting changes to the day of the fourth blue moon the next day. Sichuan Park had also improved his fortunate attire and made early preparations, but he was perplexed by the fact that the small bunnies were very boisterous today. The couple of rabbits carrying the young bunnies was about to get a signal from Sichuan Park telling them to return home quickly. Seeming to encourage them, the rabbit pair swiftly departed, leaving Sichuan Park with onlookers gaping in disbelief. Then, with a wave as if to wish him success, they parted ways with confused Sichuan Park, who had no idea what was about to happen. Nonetheless, he had a gut feeling that something bad was about to happen because the solar eclipse had already begun. Sichuan Park tilted his head slowly to see, only to witness the cute small bunnies become enormous and begin to display their teeth and claws. Sichuan Park saw that the light abruptly blazed before it dissipated. Adorable little rabbit ears materialized, and the tiny bunnies instantly changed to white and black. The scene changes to the next day, and the rabbit couple is once again glad that their offspring have grown up. He realized that this was the small bunny's coming-of-age ritual. In the meantime, the oldest extended its hand and cried out. A moment after, a shovel materialized in the oldest's grasp. Sichuan Park was astounded to see this. It turned out that as they mature into adult farmer white rabbits, the oldest awoke to find a shovel, but they could also get their own awakened tools, which they certainly couldn't borrow. The fifth was an exception, as the second and third received carts and sickles respectively from Mr. Rabbit. Because he was a warrior rather than a farmer and had a hammer as his awakening tool, he went by the moniker Black Warrior Bunny. The situation changed once more, and everyone went to work. The small rabbit was likewise quite content with his line of work. The fourth person chopped the spring onions after Mrs. Rabbit, while the second person went after Mr. Rabbit, who was in charge of watering. The oldest was in charge of preparing the ground for the plants, while the third's cart was used to move the little tomatoes. Got a lot simpler to see when the once small bunnies grew older and were ready to assist their parents. Sichuan Park was overjoyed, but a fifth rabbit remained, and he ended up being the only unemployed one in the tower. Since the warrior's duty was to defend the farm, no creatures attacked their way of life within the cave. He had to prevent the fifth rabbit from feeling worthless. At that moment, the fifth rabbit had an epiphany and began pointing at the fish pond behind them. Sichuan Park realized what he was trying to say, making joyful sounds. They could use the hammer to catch fish. Sichuan Park started experimenting with this as he pulled the fish out, saying that the fifth rabbit would have to catch them. At that moment, a large fish sprang out, and the fifth rabbit saw it coming and struck the fish forcefully with the hammer. The fifth, a warrior, was definitely nimble, but the meal was doomed this evening as it turned into fish paste. And Black Warrior Bunny was unaware. Following the rule of not wasting food, tonight's dinner consisted of fish paste. It was bad to have them eat this after a hectic day since everyone lost their appetite upon seeing the mushy fish flesh. Sichuan Park's only response to the other little bunny's outrage was to come out and console the unfortunate fifth. Simply said, practice makes perfect. Consequently, the seed shop reopened as the bunnies grew used to their new responsibilities, while Sichuan Park was eating. But after a moment he was taken aback to find how much the seeds had cost compared to when he had initially purchased them. He could only buy sticky maize seeds with his current meager 0.9 dungeon coin fortune. He has to figure out a means to make additional money. Inside the tower, there are 3 known ways to obtain dungeon coins. The first is by getting awards for clearing levels. Third, by accomplishing tasks in order to receive prizes. Second, by selling priceless monster corpses to peddlers. Sichuan Park can't use any of these techniques to clear levels since he can't exit the cave entrance. There is now just one more option. He gestured to the administrator to request that the prize be converted to dungeon currency. Despite the statement that it may donate some when it grew up, The administrator appeared to be unaware of what dungeon coins are. Sichuan Park was a little discouraged. How long would it take? The administrator kindly informed him that it would take around 300 years. It appears that this strategy won't be effective either for surviving for the time being due to the dungeon coin problem. He was limited to selecting corn seeds. Suddenly, a bag filled with golden plump corn seeds materialized. Everyone grew more animated upon witnessing this, but not before they had to eat. Eventually, even though everyone had had their fill, Sichuan Park intended to dry and keep the last few grilled fish. When the little honeybee spotted him, she stayed around Sichuan Park even though she hadn't been there in a few days. At that moment, the little honeybee sensed an impending threat, and the bunnies readied themselves for combat as well. I'm not a terrible cat, so don't be alarmed. A cat paw suddenly stretched out to frighten Sichuan Park. Could it be a monster? What the cat was doing here piqued Sichuan Park's curiosity as well. It sprang down and held out a delicate pink paw. In the same way that Sichuan Park encountered a hawker for the first time and unintentionally came upon a fortunate cat, my name is Teo. He hadn't anticipated it to be a cat, though. Those large, wide eyes, round cheeks, and velvety paws were simply too much. Sichuan Park, a cat enthusiast, found it difficult to resist the impulse to pet the animal. However, it turns out, Teo, the little cat, came to visit Sichuan Park and do some business as he was aware that she was new to the neighborhood of seed shops. Sichuan Park was also interested in any valuables Teo could own, but at that moment the cat began grumbling in its tummy. He expressed regret, explaining that he hadn't eaten much on the journey and hadn't anticipated being hungry before starting the operation. Sichuan Park smiled. You're here to do business with me, so I should make a profit first, as he saw this. He then took out a grilled fish. When the cat saw this, his large bell-shaped eyes drooled, expressing genuine adoration. Do you want to eat? This was an easy victory for Sichuan Park. Don't you want to test how great this grilled salmon smells? The cat paused for a second before rejecting. The cat eventually gave in to Sichuan Park's seduction. It had a voracious appetite, gobbling up 5 cooked fish at once. The cat thanked Sichuan Park, who grinned and added, I should be thanking you, as it filled its belly to the full. The cat then proceeded to remove his belongings, but Sichuan Park stopped him before he could pay for the grilled fish. The freshly launched cat was unaware of how cruel society might be, thus that will be worth 0.5 dungeon coins. Sichuan Park said, There's no such thing as a free lunch in the world, yet it was you who asked me to eat. It depends on whether or not my pals here agree that you're not going to eat the fish and then flee, are you? The cat, feeling that it shouldn't have to suffer a loss for nothing, was so overcome by the numbers against him that it could only empty its pockets in tears. Therefore, it boldly introduced its unique things, encouraging Sichuan Park to marvel at its riches. This flask has been endowed with the ability to preserve food for an extended period of time, regardless of the temperature that is put into it. And just then, Sichuan Park abruptly ended it by declaring, and this little fan has been enchanted with wind magic. The cat is quite upset since the things you brought are really just garbage. These are unique treasures that I got from outside the tower. Sichuan Park talked slowly. You might not see their worth. They don't possess any magic that would cause the cat to second-guess its choices. The vacuum flask's main function is to keep it sealed off from external air, as Sichuan Park later explained. The portable heater and the mini electrode, which have the strongest fan, will switch off if they are unintentionally left on, reducing heat loss. Skaram expressly said that they were enchanted, but the cat obviously didn't trust Sichuan Park when she mentioned that the battery was about to run out. This is the real story behind what you purchased, Sichuan Park stated, as the little fan abruptly ran out of energy and stopped rotating. The cat started crying at this point because it finally started to believe Sichuan Park, that vile goblin Skaram. If it's okay with you, Sichuan Park moved closer to console him as she saw him, asking why I'm always being tricked. Can you explain what happened? The cat, who had long loved Meryl and had been a part of the 75th floor neutral zone, finally opened out about the sadness it had been holding inside. The most beautiful cat in the town of Grenier had saved up little fish to declare its love, but Meryl was not happy with his cheap fish. Just then, Oren, the wealthy young village master, smacked it on the ground and ignored Tao. He just pulled out a fish, which captured Meryl's attention right away. "What cheap crap dare you offer as a gift?" Tao was shocked to see that even if he spent all of his funds, he wouldn't be able to purchase a nice salmon. Meryl was quickly taken by the wealthy second-generation Tao, who was shocked that his boyhood buddy would leave him. "Could you gaze into my eyes and guarantee that our recollections weren't real?" Meryl bowed her head upon hearing this. She then pointed her razor-sharp cat claws at him and said, "I just gave you a few smiles, but you kept bugging me." Tao began to doubt his existence after reading this, and he left that depressing area to become the merchant he is today. "I detest cats who smell of poor fish, like you." He planned to use the remaining 5 dungeon coins to purchase items after enrolling as a peddler with 50. Unintentionally encountered Scarum. As a result of his influence, Tao fell for the hoax of finding unique goods beyond the tower. He came here with great expectations and an empty stomach, only to be informed that he had wasted his last few dollars on a pile of rubbish. He started weeping, and Sichuan Park noticed that he was indeed a sucker. At that moment, he experienced a sudden burst of inspiration. He then proposed that Tao eat 2 grilled fish to help him relax, but the cat wasn't buying it, saying, "You're probably waiting to ask for money after I finish eating, out of dread of getting duped again." "I'm not a fool." Sichuan Park gave them a freebie, and when the cat heard this, his eyes really became big. However, there's a catch. Tao was perplexed by Sichuan Park's suggestion to form a partnership just when he had discovered a sucker, or rather a partner. Sichuan Park believed that despite his perception of himself as a worthless novice vendor, he was still rather competent. Finding a suitable mate demonstrated Tao's good fortune. Subsequently, official talks with the little cat Tao began. After that, Sichuan Park summoned the bunnies over, and they quickly showed up with a little cart that Sichuan Park could comfortably lie on. Since Tao lacked initial funds, they made the decision to work together to increase their income. Tao was rather happy with this plan. Sichuan Park thought it was a fantastic chance to start again and anticipated gaining more dungeon coins as a result of this partnership. In an effort to increase the farm's output and size, Sichuan Park offered Tao a strategy because the fake items wouldn't sell, which was to sell him items. Tao would receive a bonus in the form of a percentage of the sales profit, but Tao was unclear about what he meant by the incentive. After hearing this, Sichuan Park gently clarified that your price is for the items, regardless of the price at which they are sold. After hearing the explanation, Tao saw the issue but thought the percentage share did not work in his advantage. "I will offer you a 3 to 5% share in dungeon coins." Consequently, he did not reply to Sichuan Park. Sichuan Park recognized his hesitation and ordered the small bunnies to deliver his covert weapon right away. Tao's eyes widened as he saw the line of cooked fish in front of him. Sichuan Park struck while the iron was still hot, informing Tao that if the partnership is successful, you will earn weekly rewards of 10 grilled fish, or the same amount of dungeon coins in addition to your share. Tao was drooling when he heard this offer and smelled the delicious grilled fish, but he couldn't help but go back to his previous experiences of being duped. He thought he couldn't accept Sichuan Park's suggestion, but Tao's cheeks were already wet. It was inevitable. Cats can't help but salivate over roasted fish, which they can't resist if you serve them 20 grilled fish. I could think about the partnership where Sichuan Park firmly removed 20 grilled fish and committed to adding 5 more. Tao was unable to continue saying, "I'm not going to give you 20 grilled fish. I'm going to hold out," after learning this. There were a total of 25 grilled fish. Beyond the weekly income, Sichuan Park provided exclusive privileges, such as free unlimited consumption of grilled fish as long as you visit. Tao's heart was racing after hearing Sichuan Park's remarks, and they formally started working together after gaining Tao's consent. Sichuan Park was getting ready to sign an agreement with Tao, and Tao even gave him the paper and pen. Sichuan Park swiftly penned all of the details of the agreement with Tao, and he firmly squeezed their palm and paw against Tao. After Sichuan Park and Tao successfully signed a contract, with Tao even leaving his handprint on it, Sichuan Park gave his new partner a relieved embrace. Tao had inadvertently imprinted his paw print without fully reading the material until he eventually understood what had happened. Tao attempted to seize the contract paper, but it had already drifted away. As a result, their agreement was created. Sichuan Park was aware of this Black Tower function previously. As long as both sides were in agreement, the Black Tower would enable this partnership. Nonetheless, he hadn't anticipated it to have this kind of an impact. In the meantime, Tao was filled with sadness because this was Sichuan Park's first contract signing. Sichuan Park said, "You'll understand in time," to which the irritated Tao snubbed him as he attempted to give the small cat a high five. "Since it is unclear whether we can work together going forward." After all, the first clause made it quite obvious that if he didn't perform properly. After hearing this, Sichuan Park used the enticing head-patting technique on the young cat, rendering the contract null and invalid. It caused Tao to become ecstatic. After the partnership was confirmed, Tao inquired about the goods he needed to sell. In order to demonstrate to him that this is the item that has to be sold, Sichuan Park brought him to the farm and selected a cherry tomato. Tao quickly examined it and saw that it was a magical ability-boosting item that could be sold for 0.01 dungeon currency to the newly awakened in the tower. Tao was dubious since Sichuan Park set the minimum price at 0.05 dungeon coins. However, after giving it some thinking, he realized that this may work out well for him. As per the terms of the contract, if he didn't reach the goal, he could still retain the grilled fish. Nonetheless, he had the option to terminate the agreement immediately. Thinking thus, Tao proactively asked how much he needed to take to sell. Park had previously invited the little bunnies to visit them. A grand total of 1,000 cherry tomatoes were required. And the 25 roasted fish that were made this week for Tao Sichuan Park made him ponder how he would get the products there. Then Tao took out his bundle, a storage device with a lot of room and charmed with several magics to keep goods fresh. Tao released his bundle in the next second, and as soon as the magic was working, the grilled fish and little tomatoes were drawn within. Then it softly touched the ground. Sichuan Park Tao was already carrying the bundle when this tool continued to get applause, prepared to leave Sichuan Park behind and go sell the little tomatoes that have been imbued with enchantment. A few days later, a group known as the Phoenix Guild was hunting monsters on the 38th floor of the Black Tower. They killed a big spider together and with a lot of work. Later, as they were merrily chatting, Dongshik heard something rustle in the bushes behind him, just when the gang believed it may be some concealed fearsome beast. The team leader heard the disturbance and turned around to find Tao gesturing that he was there for trade. With his feline gait, Tao emerged. Waken identified him as a vendor, and Tao honored the agreement by speaking in meowish terms. He won over a slew of females with this endearing demeanor, and now Tao realized why Sichuan Park had included this requirement. In fact, Tao was well received as soon as he spoke, and he didn't wait to whip out the magical cherry tomatoes. The audience first became disinterested, but Tao persuaded them to look at their information panels. When they did, they discovered that it was a magical object that could boost magic ability by 0.01 for 10 minutes. But they hesitated one more when they learned that each was worth 0.05 dungeon coins. While several of the females were about to leave because they believed Tao was insane, one of them glanced closely at the material. This made it very evident that taking one might break down 10 grams of fat and be reused. Hearing the females speak. To Tao's surprise, individuals who had earlier shown little interest in the tomatoes now were anxious to purchase them in bulk. The others who were ready to depart halted in their tracks. Even the team members who weren't worried about their bodies chose to buy some while in the cave. Mrs. Rabbit, even if the magic cherry tomatoes only somewhat enhanced their magical powers, Folks trying to reduce weight would undoubtedly find it appealing because they could dissolve 10 grams of fat without causing any negative side effects. Sichuan Park was also certain that the magic cherry tomatoes would be a huge hit since they tasted excellent. The 1,000 magic cherry tomatoes he brought out sold out in a matter of minutes, precisely as he had anticipated. Tao was shocked to see how much money he had gained while the small cat was away, and he knelt down in shock. Carrot seeds were planted in Sichuan Park by the rabbits, and many days later the little cat, the little baby, and the little cat were all out. The little baby, and the little baby were all out. Later, these seeds had all sprouted young shoots. But only around 700 of the 1,000 seeds that were collected survived. Similarly, not all of the seeds taken from the miraculous cherry tomatoes germinated. This also applied to the sweet potato stems and maize seeds, even with Sichuan Park's individual planting. The germination rate was just about 60%. He surmised that this may be because of his inexperience as a farmer. Or maybe the cave's soil was insufficiently productive now that he knew how to get dungeon money. He intended to plant even more diligently because Mr. Rabbit and Sichuan Park both had a strong sense of resolve. A loud noise sounded from behind them, and there was Black Warrior Bunny, fishing in style. He used a torch to entice a lot of piranhas, and in the next instant, Black Bunny lifted his hammer, instantly stunning every fish. Observing this, Sichuan Park complimented Black Bunny's fishing abilities when he caught a sizable haul of fish. When Sichuan Park saw that Black Bunny was glowing, indicating that he was leveling up, he was extremely relieved. The white bunnies had acquired experience from farming, while the small black rabbit, always the least helpful black bunny on the farm, leveled up for the first time. He eventually got to brag in front of his brethren, but the oldest white rabbit promptly chastised him. Sichuan Park started going through his backpack during a break and swiftly took out the vacuum flask Teo had provided. He discovered a couple packets of leftover coffee inside. He was thankful to Teo and Skaram for allowing him to have coffee in the Black Tower. Then, even though he was out of sugar, Sichuan Park ripped open a container of coffee powder and dumped it into a water bottle. Thankfully, the tiny honey had honey. Soon, a special honey Americano was prepared. After a substantial drink, when he saw the young bunnies were intrigued, Sichuan Park felt an unheard-of sense of satisfaction and handed them the coffee. But Black Warrior Bunny's expression abruptly altered after taking a sip, and he vomited out the entire cup of coffee. The other young bunnies were unable to tolerate the coffee's bitterness either. Suddenly, Sichuan Park heard a buzzing sound, turned back and shouted to the small honey bee. Sichuan Park received a happy response from the bee, which she watched as it went in a certain way. There was another hive there which Sichuan Park observed. The small honeybee had relocated within the cave. However, when Sichuan Park and the tiny honeybee were having a pleasant conversation, the administrator of the Black Tower issued a mission. This time, the administrator would be quite upset if 10 magic cherry tomatoes were declined. Sichuan Park was secretly relieved that even the threats had vanished, but he still gave the administrator the magical cherry tomatoes, who even expressed gratitude to Sichuan Park, giving him a brief moment of comfort. The administrator's demeanor had drastically altered from before. In the meantime, the administrator could see the small honeybee in a certain area of the Black Tower, where Skaram and his friend were having a drink in a goblin's house. Then abruptly brought up the little kitten Tao. Skaram was certain Tao would never sell those trinkets. When Tao ran out of money, he would unavoidably go back to the Peddlers' Guild, where Skaram would appear to be willing to provide him capital, then force him to pay his own interest on a permanent basis. After drinking, Skaram accessed his message board. The rankings were revised today, and Skaram has managed to break into the top 1,000. Heard his partner praising him. The goblins next to him thanked him and asked when they might be added to the list. Skaram was secretly happy to have duped so many unsuspecting clients, but when he attempted to investigate the vendors who had come before him, when Skaram realized Tao was rated higher than him, he was shocked to hear other companions speaking to him. This immediately infuriated Scarum, who became even more desperate to apprehend Tao and steal his method of selling items. Sichuan Park was taken aback by Tao's prompt return, but a few days later Tao made it back to the cave. Greeting Sichuan Park with much astonishment, but Tao mistook this reply for news that he had been discovered. So he slipped Sichuan and told him that the next time he would come right after selling merchandise and wouldn't remain to play on other levels. Sichuan Park then asked a few questions, and Tao Frank admitted that he had played for 4 days. As he had previously stated that he intended to sell things on the 30-something floors, and that the journey should take around 10 days total. However, after selling all of the magic cherry tomatoes, it turned out that he had 4 days to stay around. Sichuan Park had originally assumed that it would take a long time to sell the items. Yet Tao came back after just 14 days, most likely as a result of selling every tomato he brought with him when he arrived. Upon seeing the small feline's constant apologies, Sichuan Park abruptly seized his shoulders, his face playfully insisting that Tao reveal everything. In this way, Sichuan Park and the little bunnies listened to Tao's tale. After giving a brief explanation of the circumstances, he removed all 50 of the tower coins he had won. After giving it some thought, Sichuan Park gave Tao 2 dungeon coins. However, Tao was perplexed to see that Sichuan Park had now referred to him as my intern. Not Tao. The CEO Sichuan Park clarified that Tao was being penalized for a promotion, and that the commission will return to 5% if he put in the necessary effort to be back in charge. Rather than being deterred by this, Tao boldly declared his resolve to put in a lot of effort and reclaim his position as CEO. Sichuan Park has since seen that Tao frequently speaks in Miao language, which was earlier stipulated in the contract to be utilized strictly in business dealings. Sichuan Park said that Tao's constant use of the Miao language, however, after discovering its advantages, would undoubtedly make the little tomatoes well known all over the world. People will eventually learn that I invented the little tomatoes since the farmer will be identified on the information website. However, upon remembering the Black Tower's regulations, Tao was abruptly shocked into silence. Due to Tao's status as a rookie peddler, Sichuan Park would not be listed in the area that would indicate the grower, providing a specific safeguard from consumers poaching. Tao felt a cold sweat go down his spine, realizing that if Sichuan Park discovered this, he may very possibly be relegated back to an intern. Tao quickly phoned Sichuan Park for the magic cherry tomatoes, fearing that he would be fired or worse. Intending to begin selling straight immediately, Sichuan Park, upon hearing this, advised him to take a few days off as he hadn't yet received his weekly income. But Tao took the initiative to pack the magic cherry tomatoes, murmuring that he had to work hard to get the grower's name removed. Seeing the thrilled Tao, he has to get 1,000 dungeon coins fast in order to advance to intermediate peddler. Sichuan Park and Black Bunny were perplexed. Was he maybe seduced by money? Numerous explorers gave Tao's magic cherry tomatoes great marks, included the daughter of the Phoenix Guild master, who requested that he bring more the following time because she enjoyed the small tomatoes so much. Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik wept upon witnessing this, since his daughter had been irritable as a result of her failed diet. But now that she had shown her father her affection, Dongshik was remarkably joyful for the first time in a long time. The fact that their crush accepted their approaches after getting the magic cherry tomatoes made the other team members thrilled as well. A few days later, Dongshik and the other team members were on the 38th level. Dongshik and his colleagues immediately started searching for the small cat Tao. With a concerned expression on his face, Tao was strolling along. His bag could hold up to 1,500 magic cherry tomatoes at once. I.e., to obtain 1,000 dungeon coins, he would need to make more than 10 trips back and forth. Tao eventually got at the location where people used to congregate, but as he looked around, he saw no one. Suddenly, a startled voice emerged from the surrounding bushes. Upon spotting Tao, the small cat, they appeared delighted and promptly cried out to their other friends. It transpired that these individuals had been waiting for Tao for a whole 2 days in order to purchase the magic cherry tomatoes. When Tao heard this, just as the others were about to pay the prior amount, his mouth fell open in shock. Tao intervened immediately to stop them. The little cat, hearing the news of the price rise, lifted its plump paws and exclaimed, "The price has gone up now." Everyone were disturbed upon seeing this Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik inquired as to the extent of the growth. Tao stated with confidence that the price per piece is now 0.07 dungeon coins, but he was quite nervous that the tomatoes wouldn't sell with such a price hike. But the Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik inquired as to how much it had increased the next second. The next second, Phoenix Guild Master Dongshik asked how much it had increased. Tao confidently replied, "Now it's 0.07 dungeon coins per piece." But his heart was racing because he thought such a price increase might mean the tomatoes wouldn't sell. The Phoenix Guild Master didn't hesitate at all and threw a bag of dungeon coins to buy 200 pieces. Tao was so taken aback by this that he meowed. The other team members muttered to one another as well. Such a nice product should normally cost more, and we never know when we'll get another chance. Everyone started purchasing in bulk as a result, and in a matter of minutes. Tao's entire supply of magic cherry tomatoes was gone. The Phoenix Guild Master asked Tao when he would return before he left, and when he found out it would be in 10 days. When they finally made it in time after purchasing the magic cherry tomatoes, Dongshik nodded in pleasure. The Phoenix Guild Master then questioned Tao about how much it had risen by. On hearing that the spider monster will return, Dongshik rallied his group to go and defeat it. Tao couldn't help but smile in private knowing that he would soon receive 1,000 dungeon coins as a result of his normal business. Another party of adventurers approached Tao as he daydreamed about becoming an intermediate merchant. Sua recognized Tao because he resembled a cat she had previously had. However, Tao objected to being referred to as Kitty by several individuals. Sua swiftly apologized after realizing this. Following some discussion, Tao discovered that Sua formerly owned a cat that was quite similar to him. Tao disagreed. He turned and went away, saying, "You must be mistaken, meow, because I am the most handsome cat in the world." As Sua swiftly withdrew a cat treat, Tao saw Sua's kind and expectant gaze and remarked, "I only enjoy grilled fish. I have no desire for anything else." But before he could continue, he gave in to the delectability in her palm. Tao devoured all of the cat snacks in a matter of seconds. How could there be something so delicious? It's unbelievable. Sua, who was ravenous for more, pulled out a variety of cat food varieties, but she had one requirement. Tao had to take a photo with her. Hearing this, Tao didn't hesitate at all. It wasn't simply a single photo I could take for eternity. "We'll all be delivered to you." Tao eventually went, happily gorging on the cat snacks. His teammates likewise seldom seen Sua this joyful. Sua expressed her satisfaction with the pictures on her phone and promised to bring cat treats for Tao the next time since he was too cute. In the meantime, Sichuan Park was teaching the Black Rabbit how to swim in the cave. To assure safety, he had also closed the entrance by the piranhas. The Black Warrior's abrupt, unmoving float on the water's surface a few days prior was the cause for their particular training. It instantly caused Mrs. Rabbit to pass out and startled Sichuan Park to the point of screaming. After exercising all day, Black Warrior Bunny didn't appear to care that much, in retrospect. Sichuan Park realized that the honey made by Little Honeybee had already been gathered and became extremely hungry. Looking above, Sichuan Park was taken aback by the beehive's surroundings ever since Little Honeybee arrived in. It has frequently been restricted inside the beehive. In addition to becoming larger, the once simple little beehive had given birth to numerous tiny, toxic baby bees. Sichuan Park, who hadn't seen Little Honeybee in a while, pondered whether they were the Little Honeybee's offspring upon seeing this. After gathering some fresh cherry tomato blossoms, Sichuan Park headed to make a present for the meeting since he should at least say hello to her. Little Honeybee was summoned to by Sichuan Park outdoors, but it appeared that their presence had infuriated the tiny bee when they arrived. Little Honeybee heard Sichuan Park's voice inside the beehive as the bees aimed their stingers toward the Black Rabbit and Sichuan Park. As a fight was about to break out, Black Warrior Bunny, undaunted of the little bees, sprang for a wooden hammer right away. All of the young honeybees were abruptly stopped by a voice, and Sijuan Park saw a big, humanoid honeybee slowly approaching him as he gazed up in dread. As the bee got closer, he stiffened up, bracing himself for the transformation that was about to happen. Sijuan Park saw it coming. Maybe a little poisonous honeybee? Little poisonous honeybee had evolved into a queen poisonous honeybee after leveling up in accordance with the notification prompt. Even though it's been claimed that women change as they mature, Little Honeybee's makeover astounded Sijuan Park. Furthermore, because this wasn't what its grandpa had explained, even Black Dragon Aileen, the manager, was perplexed. Instead of eating meat, the honeybees at Sijuan Park's farm drank nectar from flowers. The queen honeybee was now joyfully flapping her wings, proving to Sijuan Park that she was, in fact, the former Little Honeybee. Both Black Warrior Bunny and Sijuan Park were shocked by the drastic transformation following the confirmation. The fruits and vegetables Sijuan Park provided for her allowed her to evolve, as the queen honeybee humorously stated. She wasn't the first queen bee to create crops, though. After consuming the nectar in the cave of Sijuan Park, Little Honeybee's aroma was stronger than before, and her weight had increased. When combined with the original queen bee's mistrust of her, Little Honeybee realized why these changes had occurred. Little Honeybee made the decision to go out on her own and build her beehive in the safest location she knew, since she too might have children and become a queen bee. Sijuan Park's cave later, she suffered in the beehive by herself, and eventually, after going through a few transformations. In celebration of her metamorphosis, Little Honeybee was reborn as a stunning queen poisonous honeybee, Sijuan Park, who gave the freshest flowers. This was the first time the queen honeybee had gotten a present, despite the fact that the congratulations were a little delayed. The delighted queen honeybee threw herself into Sijuan Park's arms. The young honeybees then imitated the queen honeybee and embraced Sijuan Park, overwhelming him with her love. The family of rabbits and queen honeybee also got along nicely.